and there was like part of a shirt sticking out of an apron, and I could tell it was probably a logo that I was familiar with, Dickies, but I wasn't sure until I could see down the apron a little bit and I could check that it was Dickies, and then even more so I asked the person if that was a Dickies shirt, and they said yeah. So what I was trying to achieve by sliding the surface like beside it is if the surface below it was reading it. Actually what vampires can do is they can walk on like different walls from just a flat ground. So if you just had a cube, well more so like a circle, or I mean a sphere, the thing behind me, if I was walking on it as if it were a treadmill and it were flat, I could be achieving the same maneuver very easily. But can he maneuver that well on top of a car if it's flying really fast down the road? Because then any little bump could knock off his center of gravity. But then again, it would be better than yours on top of just a flatbed without any different surfaces. Maybe the different surfaces that he's going on and maneuvering past each arc allows him to gain more accesses of gravity, so he's actually more well balanced the more that he is maneuvering over ledges that are not even flat to the car going forward, or anyone else around him that he may be trying to. When something's stacked, hey, there's a phone that I'm holding, and then below it was a screen that I put on top of to hold my phone, and then the screen below it had to be pressed so that it was stacked. And that's the same thing that is what's happening with these two plastic sheets. But the correlation between the two can actually, see the problem with my phone, let's pretend this was my phone and this was the card swiping machine. The card swiping machine screen had to get clicked, but my phone was on a swiper machine on the bottom, correlated to the phone on the top because they're already stacked. If he could have just slid my phone literally, and then that would have pressed the button under it, and that could have happened when the dots are a thing called polarization. So I don't know how Yoda came about, but speaking of cocoons, who's to say that he wasn't in a capsule in outer space? Actually, what I think this is a better representation was when Moses was this size and he was sent in a basket down a river because he was about to get murked. You know what the old saying is, if you can't beat them, then join them. That's completely wrong. What if you had no choice and you're turning into a cocoon? If a caterpillar didn't have a choice to turn into the cocoon, and then once it did, when you're within the cocoon, the cells around its body changes, and so then it can develop wings by its abdomen becoming different within the cocoon. And this is what happens in an embryo. So technically we didn't have a choice to go into an embryo, the same way that the caterpillar doesn't have a choice to go into a cocoon. And that's one of the keys to understanding why the mainstream, aka everyone on planet Earth, doesn't know why the cells divide in the early stages of the fetus developing. And that is a eugenics quarrel that could probably end anything that would be forced, such as a caterpillar being forced into a cocoon, or a snake shedding its skin. The material is only good because it can make motion, so that's why gold is profitable as a currency. So when you are actually getting the capitalization of that, it's fitting where in mathematics you have the differentiation from zero, but in science of computers it's within the series and sequences, and that's originated from mathematics, and they go hand in hand. So when we're talking about length and distance, the Lorentz contraction is substantially the derivation from zero, and it can grow and shrink depending on your driving ability. Now, can logging the Lorentz contraction and exfoliating would be maximized. So if you want to make it bigger or shorter at length, whatever is beneficial, it's both the same when you're addressing it in that standpoint. And why I thought to mention things that could happen is not because I'm schizophrenic. It's just because I know what we're up against, the robotics of AI. And this is where it's not a hit or miss, it's the answer's there. And that's comforting because in mathematics, where they go hand in hand with computing through logarithmic notation and series and sequences quite accurately, they do a pretty nice crossover. But then the differentiation of you not being a robot gives you a disadvantage when a robot can drive a car and you're supposed to be in a location, and then it can beat you, especially if you have to get to location. Well, now you have the odds stacked up against you where you're not perfect, and then the grace period, of course, will come in, and an interplay where it's going to be zero tolerance in a government where people are buying into it and don't question it because they're scared to, because they think once they do, everything will break down and crumble. So they think that they're being a hero by doing their part and getting in line. Only problem is, if you don't ask a question, you might get in the wrong line and become part of a slaughterhouse. Yep, it's coming in a day and age where getting HIV is no different than walking down the street and breathing a fresh breath of air to breathe. According to anything that could ever happen, that's of course one thing. And with such niche categories as particles that are within your body and constrained to proper functionality like eating good nutrition, the opposite of that would of course be getting hit with blunt trauma. The blunt trauma would of course be, I did the Mexican accent, sorry about that. The blunt force trauma would ostensibly be, I think I did the Mexican accent because I didn't want to mention what I'm about to say, particular particles, would of course be the opposite of good nutrition, being hit with HIV. And I speak in this very gingerly because I'm as far away from that as probably anyone could be. And it was why, if I do get that from something that is... And what irony is that I just broke all that down in front of... I did the Mexican accent again in front of the medical facility establishment. And that's why they calculate in scientific notation. Once again, a video receptor that's like a basket where it's collecting the feed. Very just similar to you putting an object inside of a basket, but it has it on a number scale. I've had my eye on her for a moment. Her hair color has gotten darker. But you don't want to keep all your eggs in the same basket because that's what